Finishes and factions, catching action.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Finishers and Factions fans, and welcome to the first SmackDown of Season 2 of Finishers and Factions. This is the SmackDown after WrestleMania from the Dickies Arena, Fort Worth, Texas, from April 25th. Ladies and gentlemen, do I have a SmackDown episode for you this week? I'm going to put this out there pretty early on. I believe that this episode of SmackDown, if you look at the matches that we have, look at the results that are there, is probably better than some of the matches and results at WrestleMania. Actually, I will turn around and put my hand up high and say they were better than some of the matches at WrestleMania. That's not me pledging my allegiance to Chelsea Green. We will come back to Chelsea Green, though, as she has a match a little bit later on in this episode. That would be a Women's United States match against Zelena Vega. But like I said, we'll get back to that a little bit later. First of all, we are going to welcome to the ring the man who has changed wrestling for the better over the last 25 years, but it's now said that he is going to ruin wrestling for the rest of us. Yes, that is the 17-time world champion, John Cena. Now, as we have been used to seeing with his entrances for the last few weeks, and especially with his WrestleMania entrance, no video package again, no lighting, just music. He doesn't run down to the ring like we're so used to him seeing. It's a slow saunter. He's got the title belt on backwards. You know, he's being as disrespectful as he can. And that is pretty much how this is going to continue. Because he comes down to the ring, he gets into the ring, and he picks on the new ring announcer. And he doesn't even say anything, he just points at him, come here. Just wiggles his finger at him. And Mark Nash comes up, he gets in the ring, and John Cena gives him a bit of paper. And we then have Mark Nash saying about his, giving his apologies because the announcement that he'd just given had been deemed disrespectful. And he then re-announces John Cena as the 17-time world champion, the greatest of all time, and the last real champion in WWE. Now, that's quite a big statement. This guy is using his ego, and you know what? I'm not even mad at it. I am so invested in this at the moment. As someone who's been watching wrestling a long, long time, and John Cena has been a big part of my viewing material with professional wrestling ever since he debuted against Kurt Angle with the ruthless aggression. We've seen the Doctor of Thugonomics. We've seen the hustle, loyalty, respect thing. We've seen a lot of John Cena over in that time. I certainly have, and I've enjoyed seeing every bit of it too. I really am personally enjoying this heel turn. I think it's brilliant. This is, like he said, no other wrestler has ever retired this way. And boy, am I hooked. I don't know if Adam feels the same way about this. We do talk a lot about wrestling off podcast, but it's not a question I've got round to asking him yet. But after John Cena has basically made Mark Nash re-announce him in a way that he wants to be made, he goes to lift the microphone up to his lips, and Randy Orton's music hits, and John's just stood there like, really? Is this how we're doing this? That's not cool. Randy Orton comes out, and the crowd are just chanting, let's go Cena, Cena sucks, which is it's basically the same chants that we've been getting for the last 25 years. But it's one of those things. And Randy Orton comes out to the ring. Now, I love Randy at the moment. I am a big fan of this guy. I have been for a long time. But yeah, this storyline between Randy Orton and John Cena is going to be incredible. And I believe this is just the start of it. So Randy Orton comes out and says, do you know that he found out a few days ago it's been 25 years to the day that John Cena and Randy Orton first shook hands. And he said until a few months ago, you never changed. It wasn't just a slogan for merch. You lived by the mantra of hustle, loyalty, and respect. That was who you are. That was a part of your day-to-day life. And he says, But you've got a void that needs filling, John. And I've been thinking about it for years, and got the millions and millions of children who you're a role model to. You should be a dad. You should be a dad. He said you've made more John Cena has created more wishes than anyone ever in the history of the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Right? The Make-A-Wish Foundation is incredible anyway. But this is a guy who has done more for that more for that non-profit organization than anyone ever has. And I think that is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I think that shows how much this guy cares, and he's busy walking around saying, I don't care about you, and I don't care about you, and I don't care about you. But he does a lot of things that makes him show that he does care, So Randy Orton says that John Cena should have some kids. And John Cena is pissed. He says, how dare you come out here smiling under the guise of making me feel better and then parent shame me in front of the whole world. Now, the reason that was kind of put out when it first happened that John Cena and Nikki Bella split up was because she wanted children and he didn't. And it's one of those that, if that is the case, that it is true, and Randy said this, that's a bit of a kick in the balls, my bro. Like, I know you don't want it, but you should have them anyway. He says, and John Cena says, look, you got kids and you love them, and good for you. But the reason he doesn't have children, John Cena says, is because he spent the last 25 years raising the WWE Universe's children. And he feels he's done a pretty great job. I'm like, you cheeky motherfucker. Like, god damn. But then you look at it. He calls out a kid in the front row saying that his dad's a loser. The kid flips him off. And he goes, great, I've just been flipped off by a 6-year-old. Like, really? So, for the last 25 years, John Cena thinks he's been a better parent to the children of the WWE than their parents themselves. That's a big statement to make, But Randy says, come on, dude. You're not just here, If it wasn't for these kids that grow into be adults that buy tickets to our shows, the kids that you've inspired to join the industry and stuff, said you wouldn't be killing it. You go, you're out here crushing it in WWE, but without the WWE, for you, there was no Hollywood. And without the WWE universe, there is no WWE. So without the fans, there's no product. Without that product, Cena would not be in Hollywood. Right? He was made in the WWE. We are aware of this. We have seen this for the last 25 years, right? We're not stupid. We might be wrestling fans, but we know what we like, right? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying to you guys. But he goes, Randy then comes and goes, I've made a lot of mistakes, right? Randy admits he's made a lot of mistakes. He's had a long journey, but he gets a lot of respect from the peers in the locker room. And he's here to stay, right? Randy is not going anywhere. He says, but John, you're just a guest now. He said, you used to be here all the time, week in, week out. You were injured, weren't injured, you were here. You were doing something. But now, WWE is it's a side story for you. You're not really too interested. He's like... Cena said he used to believe Randy Orton's perspective about the universe, the fan, the product, and then because... But they didn't win together. He said John Cena won on his own, and he's never needed one of them. And they all chant in the same breath, let's go Cena, Cena sucks. Like, he's still really very much like, I did this for me. I don't need those guys. Like, it's one of them. He said, I called out a rando who went white. Imagine being told you suck for 25 years. And that, that's a good point. It's a very good point. He said, but Randy Orton is just the same as the WWE universe. It's a hypocrite. John Cena says the crowd manipulates the truth to get their ending. And he's, which is kind of true, And then he calls out a guy and says the only thing this guy's ever done with his life is show up to a WWE event in a Jack Black cosplay. I don't think it was actually Jack Black. I think it was a guy that was definitely in cosplay, but he's probably trying to do Mick Foley, to be fair, but they are both very similar style gentlemen. John Cena says he's been labelled a guest because he tried to do something different. And he says, I mean, a lot of this was just John repeating the same points. But one point he did make, which I found quite interesting. He says that Randy Orton says he was stupid to believe he could come out here and play the Rhodes, and kind of play the way that things work, where, he's the good guy and John's the bad guy, when it's normally John's being the good guy and Randy's the bad guy. He was trying to work out, I'm stupid for trying to come out here and trying to flip the roles. He says, but let me just talk a little minute. He said, you've just taken that title off Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania in a great match. He said, but when you think about Cody Rhodes, his theme tune says that wrestling doesn't have one royal family. He says, it's not just that statement there is not just about Cody's family. That's Randy's family too. For those of you who, aren't aware or hadn't remembered, Randy Orton's actually a third generation WWE superstar himself. So the title that Cena is trying to run away with by calling himself the last real champion, that's a big offensive move to say to Randy Orton. And then John Cena says, look, I've won 17 titles already. You've won 14, right? Between the two of them, they have 31 world titles. That is an impressive amount, considering they're still both, Randy's still got a fair few years in him, I reckon. I reckon Randy's got another 5 to 6 years at least. I think, we know Cena's retiring, but his body could probably still do another 5 years. I just don't think he wants to, which is fair enough, But Randy Orton says that John Cena won't ruin wrestling. It'll be over his dead body because wrestling is his life. And John says, shut up. I'll explain. Like I said, Cena's won 17, Randy's won 14, but when Cena leaves with the title, Randy will forever be frozen at 14. He said, yeah, there'll be another show, there'll be other matches, there'll even be another tin can title for you to walk around. But once you get hold of that, your counter starts at 1. And he said he's not just trying to erase Randy Orton's title reigns. He's trying to erase the title reigns of all 3 generations of Randy's family. Randy says that John Cena calls himself the last real champ. Well, prove it. Let's have a match. Let's have a title match right now. And Cena raises the title up in the air and he says, no. He said, like I've said so many times over the last 25 years, I'm doing this to save your ass. He said, yes, there should be a match. Randy Orton versus John Cena for the title. He said, but that's not going to happen here. It should happen at Backlash. Now this year, if you're not aware, in 2 weeks' time, Backlash is in St. Louis, Missouri, which is Randy Orton's hometown. So John says, we'll do it at Backlash in St. Louis. You can spend the day with your family, be well rested, because when I beat you, you won't have any excuses. And he does. He then throws the title at Randy and uses that as a cheap shot to start something. Getting payback for Monday Night Raw, where Randy hit him with a RKO out of nowhere. And he lines up to hit Randy Orton with the title, but misses, and Randy hits an RKO on, and it was a really well hit RKO as well. Gets up and just rips off his hoodie and climbs up onto the ring post with Cena's championship belt and just holds it up in the air. Vintage Randy Orton, just in, out, message sent. Absolutely beautiful. I completely loved it. Now, did I love it as much as the next segment of this episode of SmackDown? I am going to get right into that with you in just a moment. But yeah, we have the arrival of Fraxium on SmackDown. Oh yeah, baby. Now, like I just said, Fraxium have arrived on SmackDown. So, little backstory to you. Fraxium were, up until very recently, the NXT Tag Team title holders. If you have been following Finishers and Factions coverage of NXT, you will know they've actually had some really good matches recently, defending their NXT title over on TNA with the brand deal they've got there. But they recently dropped their tag team titles at Stand and Deliver to Hank and Tank, which meant they have been available to bring up to the main roster, and Fraxium were signed to SmackDown, and I'm not going to lie, I am very, very excited about what these boys can do on the main roster. They are going to be future SmackDown tag team title holders. Yeah, they are definitely, give them 6 months and they'll have that tag team title in their hands, I think. And they were going to be rocking it very well with the likes of D.I.Y, Street Profits, and then first of all, tonight in their debut, Fraxium, so the team of Axiom and Nathan Fraser go against the team of Angel and Berto from Los Garza, who are part of the Asmo Delgado or something along those lines, part of a bigger group of faction run by Santos Escobar. Now, I didn't struggle to take notes on this match for the reason of it was a poor match. The fan in me got really, really sucked into this one. That, and whenever you watch Fraxium, it is such a high-paced, fast match with so many incredible, quick moves. It is, if I was to try and do a move-by-move, sort of play-by-play for you, it would take hours. And nobody wants to listen to me for that long. So I'm going to hit you with a couple of bullet points for this one. And some of the bigger moves that I felt that you guys might need to know a little bit about, and then we will move on, because the segment after this is actually going to be a very, very fun one, and I'm really looking forward to it. So we're going to push through this one, and then we're going to move on. So yeah, Los Garza versus Fraxium. We've got Angel and Berto versus Nathan Fraser and Axiom. And it starts off with Nathan Fraser and Angel on the outside, with Axiom and Berto on the inside, and it goes into a double team from Fraxium pretty quickly, sending Berto onto the outside. Nathan Fraser and Axiom hitting suicide dives pretty much over and over again. I'm pretty sure it started off with Nathan Fraser hitting one, Axiom hitting one, and then Nathan Fraser going over the top rope with a moonsault, or top rope with a front flip in it to sort of take everyone out. There was just an awful lot of aerial offense pretty quickly, until the members of Los Garza realised that if they could stop the aerial offense, they could stop most of the attack, and Angel ends up pulling down the second rope, I believe, when Axiom went to hit sort of a kick, like a 619 style kick, but he went through the ropes to the outside. Nathan Fraser springboarded in, finishing off his springboard with a nice little super kick, and some absolutely incredible speeds running those ropes into a springboard suplex and a running senton for a 2 count on Berto. Now, I'm going to pop this up on the SmackDown, on the Finishers and Factions TikTok in a little while. Who runs the ropes faster, Nathan Fraser or Bron Breakker? Let me know on our socials. You can get hold of us on Twitter and TikTok. The @ are Fin and Fan Pod. You can email us. It's finishersandfactions@gmail.com. Let me know what you think. Who runs the ropes faster, Nathan Fraser or Bron Breakker? one of the big ones I got here was Axiom hitting a Spanish fly at the end of the match, and Nathan Fraser hitting the Phoenix Splash for the 3 count. So Fraxium did win their SmackDown debut, and it was a very, very good match. There just was not a huge amount of high-level moves to throw out there. And if I told you every tag in the match, it would literally be like tag, 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 tag. And that's just Nathan Fraser and Axiom. So yeah, this is one of the shorter matches on the card, but it was a very, very good match. And it was one of those I definitely think, for the time that it got, was a really nice little introduction to SmackDown fans for Fraxium, for those who do not know what has been going on NXT. Now, this next segment is something that I have been looking forward to all episode, so I'm just going to jump straight into it, I think. Like I said, my favourite section of this week's episode, it is Tiffy time! Well, not straight away, it's not. We get a reminder about our main event, which is a tables, ladders and chairs match for the tag titles between D.I.Y, Street Profits and the Motor City Machine Guns. And then we hear from Tiffy Stratton, the women's champion, and she says at WrestleMania in front of 60,000 people it was Tiffy time, and she went toe-to-toe with the GOAT of female wrestling, Charlotte Flair. And at points she did doubt herself, but she still managed to walk out of WrestleMania a champion. And she was told she was the next Charlotte Flair, but that's wrong, because there is only one Tiffany Stratton and several imitations of Charlotte Flair. At which point we hear the entry music of Jade Cargill saying that it's time. Tiffy basically just needs to cut it, and she came here to give credit where credit was due. And the match that she had at WrestleMania with Charlotte Flair was impressive, but it just made the target on her back bigger. And Jade Cargill has nothing but time now that her match with Naomi was dealt with at WrestleMania, and she decided that she wants to remind everyone why she came to WWE and why she wants to be a champion here. And it's time to understand, just because you've beaten Charlotte Flair, you're not the best in the world, because Tiffy Stratton has not faced Jade Cargill. So Tiffy Stratton basically turns around and says, you know what? Let's go for it. Someone send a ref out here and let's get this match on the road. And the next thing we see would be a referee come flying down that ramp, and we are taken to a commercial break as we get Tiffy Stratton versus Jade Cargill for the women's title on SmackDown. And this was, well, we could have had a few impromptu matches today and we didn't get them, but this one has been thrown right to us, and we've got ourselves a little bone. So this one starts off with Jade Cargill taking out Tiffany Stratton with a shoulder tackle. Tiffy Stratton rolls up Jade Cargill for a 2 count. And then Tiffy offers Jade Cargill a handshake in the middle of the ring, and Jade takes it and basically ends up in a headlock. And then Jade Cargill gets out of that with an arm drag. Tiffy Stratton hits an arm drag of her own, and then we get a backbreaker from Jade Cargill. Now, this match was not particularly long, but it was a brutal, brutal match. Jade Cargill rolled Tiffy up after a running hip attack, and then hits a spine buster for a 2 count. And then hits another spine buster for another 2 count on the women's champion. And it looks at this point like, you know, Jade Cargill could be walking out of SmackDown as the women's champion. But it does not happen that way at this moment. We have reminded at this point that Tiffy has been women's champion for 112 days since she cashed in that Money in the Bank on the 9th wonder of the world, Nia Jax. I'm not entirely sure if that's actually her nickname now I've said that. I think I've messed that one up. Yeah, I'm definitely sure I've messed that one up, but we are going to push through with that one. I've got here that Tiffy is pretty much in full control. She hits a rolling senton and a moonsault, which Jade Cargill moves out of the way from. Basically, the only reason Jade got the opportunity to get out of the way is because Tiffy slipped on the first attempt going up for the moonsault, and she had to climb back up a second time. And we end up with Jade Cargill. It basically grabs her into a powerbomb electric chair slam for a 2 count. I would not want to get on the wrong side of Jade Cargill. We've seen some incredibly impressive maneuvers off her in the past, and the strength of this woman is absolutely phenomenal. I say absolutely incredible. Jade Cargill goes for a choke slam, ends up getting it reversed and rolled up into a 2 count, and then Tiffy Stratton hits Jade Cargill with a basement dropkick for the 2 count. But Tiffany Stratton goes up top, and Jade Cargill basically just bounces, like box jumps straight up onto the top rope as well. And Jade Cargill pulls off an incredible superplex off the top rope, but cannot get the cover in. As Tiffy Stratton rolls out of the ring to try and regain some breath and some composure, Naomi comes flying out of nowhere, beating Jade Cargill, slamming her into the ring post 2 times, and then a third one for good luck, as Jade Cargill drops to the floor, and Naomi is laughing like the Joker as she re-enters the ring, and Naomi exits the ring after a stare down with Tiffy Stratton. But that was just a distraction on Naomi's behalf, because flying in from behind and basically taking Tiffy Stratton out like a fart in the wind was Nia Jax. Nia Jax returns after their storyline got cut short in the build-up to WrestleMania, with Charlotte Flair choosing Tiffy after her Royal Rumble win. We are now going to go back to seeing Nia Jax ripping the head off Tiffy Stratton at every opportunity. And this basically finishes off with Nia Jax hitting an Annihilator on Tiffy Stratton, picking up Tiffy's title and just walking around with it raised above her head. This match shows that not only is Jade Cargill not finished with Naomi, but Nia Jax is not finished with Tiffy either. So where these 4 women's storylines are going to go from here, I cannot tell. I do believe there might be a tag match at some point between the 4 women. I'm guessing we're probably going to aim to have Jade and Tiffy go in against Nia and Naomi. But we'll see where that runs in the next couple of weeks, and we will see if I've got that one right. So next we jump into a segment with Jacob Fatu. Now, Jacob Fatu is the new US Championship holder. He won that from LA Knight at WrestleMania. And he comes to the ring with Solo Sikoa. Now, Solo introduces Jacob Fatu, and they get to the center of the ring and says that at WrestleMania, everyone saw what Solo Sikoa already knew, and that Jacob Fatu is the future of this company, and to let him remind us that no one wanted Jacob Fatu in the WWE except for Solo Sikoa, and he made it all happen. And he is the reason that Jacob Fatu is the champion, because he brought him here and took him to the promised land. At which point, Jacob Fatu is fed up of hearing Solo run his mouth and trying to take credit for the things that he has done in that ring. Instead, takes the mic from him and says, "Look, I told you I'd win this title and bring it back to the family, and I'd do it with you or without you." And he said, "Texas, look at your new US champion." And he knows that now he's got that title, he's now America's Most Wanted. And with that title, he's a menace to society. But you need to get in where you fit in, because he's all gas and no breaks with it. Do you know what I mean? At which point, we see the former United States title holder come out, Mr. L.A. Knight. Yeah. And he basically says, you know, at WrestleMania, he guaranteed Jacob Fatu would eat a BFT. And he did. And then afterwards, Fatu pinned him in the middle of that ring. But Knight says, I ain't worried about having a hell of a match. As everyone says, you had a hell of a match. He says, I only care about winning. And I want my rematch right now. And then, with the one person I did not expect to come into this equation, decides to hit. And we hear the sound of a sword being unsheathed and swung. And the Scottish crybaby himself, Drew McIntyre, enters the arena. Now, Drew comes out saying it's not easy being Drew McIntyre, but he feels it is, and he's got some big guns, like Texas. But professionally, he's been screwed over, and at WrestleMania, he beat Damian Priest in what has been described as the most violent match in WrestleMania history, the Sin City Street Fight. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. If that was violent, I've done worse things to myself in the shower. That was probably one of the worst street fight matches that you have ever seen. I did not feel it was a WrestleMania quality match. I've seen, we saw the street fight between Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. If that match had been at WrestleMania, that would have stolen the show, right? It was incredible. This match, the only thing it stole was our time, right? I really did not think too much of it. After watching it again, after doing our WrestleMania coverage, I think we got screwed. But McIntyre thanks Damian Priest for letting him embarrass him in front of all of his family, and he goes on to say the next plan was to challenge John Cena for the title. But Randy Orton jumped the line, which is stupid, considering Drew says, I beat Randy 3 weeks ago. I pinned him in the middle of that ring. He says, hi bloodline, and yawns. LA Knight asks if he's done yet. John Cena's a punk, according to Drew McIntyre, and Drew wants to fight the baddest dog in the yard, the baddest champion in WWE, and that, he says, is Jacob Fatu. I mean, I don't think we can disagree with that. Fatu is an absolute animal. And I'm not going to lie, those running hip attacks, I think if I had to take one, I'd probably take the one just to say I'd done it and be like, nah, I am good, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. I am out of here. But that is one of those, there is a big difference between me and the guys that jump in that ring night in, night out. I am not a trained performer, and they are, and they know what they're doing, and I sure as hell fucking don't. So, that is one of those, I suppose. But we then get LA Knight saying, wake him up when Drew is done, and Drew says that, I don't know why he's kind of running his mouth. His last US title run was a joke, at which point we get to relive that amazing joke where LA Knight says, I would say your last title run was a joke, but honestly, I can't remember it. And for those of you who can't either, I will remind you that Drew McIntyre last won the championship at WrestleMania 40. And then Damian Priest cashed in his Money in the Bank on him about 5 minutes later. So he also lost his title at WrestleMania 40, but it has been only a year since Drew last held gold. Anyway, LA Knight says, to Drew, if you've got a problem with Randy Orton, go and talk to Randy Orton. But now it's about LA Knight and his US title time, and I'm gonna. Why don't you come and show me why you deserve an opportunity at my title? And Drew says, okay, I'll give you a fight. Nick Aldis, we then get to see, the general manager of SmackDown, comes to the top of the ramp and says that for later on in the evening it will be Drew McIntyre versus LA Knight 1-on-1. And the winner of that match will become the number one contender for Jacob Fatu's US title, which is going to be quite a big thing. We could end up having Drew McIntyre versus Jacob Fatu, which I think could be an incredible match. We've seen a lot of LA Knight versus Jacob Fatu, and let's face it, each time those guys get in the ring together, they are incredible matches. We've as fans here, we have possibly a hell of a match coming up. So we'll wait a little bit later on that one. But first of all, we get to go and see Byron Saxton backstage with Zelena Vega, basically reminding us that 2 weeks ago, Zelena Vega beat Chelsea Green by a count out. And then last week, she beat her via pinfall, basically just saying, look, if you beat Chelsea Green tonight, you could be the new women's US champion. At which point, Zelena Vega says, look, I've wanted this for so long, and her mentor, Rey Mysterio, and the late, great Eddie Guerrero, were both former US title holders. And Zelena Vega ain't going home until she has that US title around her waist. And we are then notified that our next match is going to be Zelena Vega versus Chelsea Green for the women's US title. So like I previously stated, our next match is Zelena Vega versus Chelsea Green for that women's United States title. We get a little recap of their previous encounters, the count out from 2 weeks ago, the pinfall from last week where we see Chelsea Green being told by Nick Aldis that her secret service of Piper Niven and Alba Fire are not needed at ringside. So it will literally just be that singles match, and we are not going to have any outside interference. Now, this time we see the Secret Service are on the outside. They do enter down the ramp with Chelsea Green. But, this really starts with Zelena Vega being all over Chelsea Green, getting a quick 2 count. Zelena Vega gets sent to the outside by a drop kick from Chelsea Green. And the Secret Service do have a little bit of an altercation where they're on the outside while Chelsea Green's distracting the ref, making sure that's not seen. Chelsea Green gets countered off counters a move Zelena Vega is trying to pull, and we end up with Zelena Vega basically hanging off the back of Chelsea Green, with her hanging off the ropes at the corner off the second one, and Zelena Vega finally pulls her down. She then, a few moments later, hits a Meteora, gets a 2 count. Followed by Chelsea Green giving her a bit of a kick in the head, and Zelena Vega following that up with a backstabber and an attempted 619. But as she goes to bounce off the ropes for the return, Piper Niven grabs at the heels and pulls her through. We then see the referee decide he has had enough of the Secret Service interfering in this match. And to be fair, they've not interfered too much, but he does catch them. The referee does catch them on the outside, putting their hands on Zelena Vega, and does throw them out of the arena. As Chelsea Green is watching Piper Niven and Alba Fire go up the ramp, Zelena Vega comes up from behind and hits a backstabber and then a code red for the 3 count. So with that shows us that Zelena Vega has won her Women's United States Championship, which is something we've seen for a while. I've been wanting Chelsea Green to drop this title for a little bit. I've got a little bit bored of the character she was playing. Her matches were always there was nothing particularly outrageous about them. They were all very standard. She might be completely different in other promotions with other stuff that she's done. I just don't find that the work she's done with WWE so far has been probably her best work. But like I said, I'm not a professional wrestler, so I can't really go too much into it. We then end up going into a recap from the Andre the Giant Battle Royale, which was, of course, on the SmackDown episode I covered before WrestleMania. That was with Carmelo Hayes winning after The Miz sacrificed himself to help Melo out. And basically, we end up with a backstage segment with Carmelo Hayes and The Miz, with The Miz saying that Melo is going to be the greatest Andre the Giant Battle Royale winner of all time, and gives him a present, which is a gold chain with a massive pendant of Andre the Giant's face on it, which I think is incredibly cool. He says that was to help celebrate Melo's moment, but he is now going out to have his own little moment, and we see The Miz in the ring next, basically kicking off, saying, since 2007, he's been at every WrestleMania, but this year he has no match, he has no mention, no backstage segment. He might as well have even been there. He's not even been there. He mentioned, at one point, he main evented WrestleMania, beating John Cena to retain the title, which is something Cody Rhodes couldn't do. And yet Cody Rhodes gets all the cheers and all the spotlight, and Miz is being a salty bitch. That is the only way I think we can put this, is Miz is being a salty bitch. And he said when Rey Mysterio hobbled into WrestleMania, did he choose a guy who had tenure to take his place in that match against El Grande and Americano? No, he didn't. He chose Rey Fenix, who's been in the company for 2 weeks. He said, when Kevin Owens got injured and Randy Orton needed an opponent for WrestleMania, what could have been bigger than The Miz versus Randy Orton? No, they pulled out an internet meme. That internet meme being Joe Hendry. Oh, we've said his name. He could possibly appear. But I believe in Joe Hendry. There we go. But, Miz is sat here bitching and moaning. And then all of a sudden, we see a completely different set of music that we have not heard for a long time. I am talking, that is, about the return of Aleister Black. Now, this has been hinted on for weeks on WWE programming. We've seen vignettes about this for the best part of a month. I'm guessing they were still sort of working out contractual agreements and stuff like that, but he's not long left AEW. He is now back where he belongs on SmackDown, and Aleister Black literally stands up from his sat-down pose in the middle of the ring and hits Black Mass on The Miz and just drops him. And he sits back down in the middle of the ring and kind of chills. Which is pretty bloody incredible if you ask me. Like, what a absolute legend in this sort of industry. Aleister Black is incredible. He wrestled in AEW under the name of Malachi Black. And yeah, I'm really, really excited to have this guy back in WWE. We then move backstage to a segment with Byron Saxton. Man, this guy is making his money today, I will tell you. Getting those appearances in. He's talking to Bianca Belair, who is backstage nursing some broken fingers. Turns out that she broke those in her match with Rhea Ripley and Io Sky at WrestleMania. And even though things didn't go the way she wanted them to, she's really proud of the match that they had at WrestleMania. And Io's still the champion, and Bianca Belair says that Io found a way to capitalise, and that's her job. But, going back to the whole Rhea shouldn't have been in that match, but while she's healing and when she gets back, she's going to be handling business. So I think we are going to see a little bit more of Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley going forward. Possibly something at Backlash, maybe. Not 100% sure. We could get something introduced next week. We will find out. But we basically then see Naomi backstage, and Nia Jax walks in on her and sort of says, look, I don't care about Jade. You do what you got to do with Jade Cargill. But when it comes to Tiffy Stratton and that title, stay out of my way. At which point, Naomi goes, that's fine. Just remember, you need to proceed with caution. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I don't think Naomi is as good as she thinks she is. But then I'm interested to see if she changes much more with this heel turn if we get a new set of moves as well. But yeah, at the moment, I'm a little bit bored of seeing Naomi. I would much rather see a little bit more of Jade Cargill or sort of some of the other female superstars that are currently on SmackDown. Talking about female superstars, that leads me nicely into my next match. That next match would be LA Knight versus Drew McIntyre for the number one contender for Jacob Fatu's US title. So I say it was a women's match. It's normally because Drew just is a massive bitch. And this one kind of starts off the same way as we really expect it. This is a power play from Drew. And he's pretty much he's here to throw a mark on a title one way or another. He wants gold around his waist. And to be fair, I can understand why. So we get Drew McIntyre slamming LA Knight on the floor and flexing up them guns because he's in Texas and he thinks they're big. And then, we see LA Knight building. This is pretty much what LA Knight does every match. Starts off pretty slow and then just builds his way up, which is, sensible, I think, to be fair. It's a very sensible way of doing it. And quite happy with one of those, to be fair. It is one of them where, yes, he starts off quite slow, but we do normally end up getting a very, very good match from him, which is something we like to have. Basically, we end up with Drew McIntyre and LA Knight trading slaps and chops in the middle of the ring, with McIntyre sending Knight outside and bouncing him off the announce table, popping him back in the ring, and LA Knight follows up on the apron where Drew shoulder tackles him out into the barricade, and he bounces ribs first off the top of that barricade. Now, for, his WrestleMania, remember, he had 2 matches on the SmackDown before WrestleMania, and then ended up going against Jacob Fatu at WrestleMania. So this guy is battered, bruised, and probably should be nowhere near a wrestling ring at this moment. Up until the point where a few moments later, he receives a brainbuster from Drew McIntyre for the 2 count. We see Drew going for the Future Shock DDT, but LA Knight reverses it and hits him with a suplex, which was actually quite a nice little suplex, to be fair. We are then informed that today's attendance in the Dickies Arena, Fort Worth, Texas, was 11,644 people, which wasn't a sold-out arena, but there's a lot going on down in North Texas at the moment. Is storm season, and I've seen some pretty incredible ones in that generalized sort of area, so I can understand maybe why it wasn't as sold out as we'd expect. It's always fun and games. So we then get LA Knight getting himself a jumping neck breaker for a 2 count. Drew McIntyre hits probably one of the loudest headbutts I have ever heard and gets a jackknife cover for 2. And LA Knight goes up top for the leaping elbow, again for a 2 count. We get a lot of 2 counts, a lot of near falls in this match, but we end up with LA Knight getting a guillotine off the top rope on Drew McIntyre, and then a baseball slide to send Drew McIntyre to the announce table, where he starts bashing his head off the announce table. And just like Joe Hendry earlier on, when they were mouthing off against Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu, we see the Enforcer again, who comes in and lays a massive Samoan spike onto LA Knight that the ref does not see. So as Drew McIntyre sets up the Claymore, Damian Priest pulls him out of the ring and starts beating him down on the outside, and the bells ring as Damian Priest sends Drew McIntyre out into the crowd, and I believe this was done as a no contest completion, because at the end, I will go into it a little bit further, but we do have a little bit of a a little bit of something going on a little bit later. Damian Priest puts Drew McIntyre through the announce table, and we then see LA Knight telling Damian Priest that he just cost him his title chance as the Samoan werewolf Jacob Fatu comes literally flying from somewhere, I have no idea where, taking out both LA Knight and Damian Priest. He then ends up throwing LA Knight and Priest back into the ring and hitting simultaneous running hip attacks on them. And we then see Jacob Fatu drop the moonsault on LA Knight, another hip attack on Damian Priest, followed up by a moonsault onto Damian Priest. This is finished with Jacob Fatu taking his title and raising it in front of everyone. Basically just kind of showing that he is the dog. Right, and for our last little section of the evening, or the afternoon, sorry, we are going into the final promo. Well, it's not even a final promo. It was a recap of Monday Night Raw, where we saw that Braun Breaker has aligned himself with Seth Rollins and Paul Heyman. And then we go into our final backstage segment of the episode as well, where we see R-Truth talking to one of the Uso brothers, and where he basically says that when he grows up, he wants to be just like John Cena. At which point the Uso brother says that he is already grown up. Looks very confused. Now, talking about confusion, I referred to them as the Uso brothers. I should know the difference between the two. I think this was Big Jim. I am not 100. I think this was Big Jim, but it could have been Jay. But yeah, no, it was one of those. And as we lead into it, we have our main event of the evening, which was that ladder match, the triple threat tables, ladders, and chair match for the WWE Tag Team titles. This is between Street Profits, D.I.Y, and the Motor City Machine Guns. And boy, have we got a match for you as our main event of the evening. This one started off with Motor City Machine Guns going for D.I.Y. And then Street Profits go after Motor City Machine Guns and D.I.Y. D.I.Y come out on top and go straight for a ladder, where we see both members of Motor City Machine Guns running baseball slide into the ladder, pushing D.I.Y out a little bit further, and then Street Profits coming in to beat Motor City Machine Guns down. There was a lot of big spots in this match. Which I actually really, really enjoyed, and there was a few parts in this match where I kind of felt wasn't really needed of too much. We do end up with Motor City Machine Guns hitting a facial on the new freshly shaved Tommaso Ciampa. Believe the guy slipped in the bathroom and ended up cutting open his chin, which meant to get stitches, the beard had to come off, and he must have been pissed. We see Angela Dawkins throw in a ladder and set it up. Chris Sabin locks in a chokehold on Angela Dawkins as he's climbing up the ladder. Just rear naked chokeholding him, and Angela Dawkins is just like, yeah, cool, I'm just going to continue going up. There was loads of chair shots, loads of ladders being tipped over. Montez Ford gets tangled up in a ladder at one point, just gets left hanging. I can't really. There are so many different bits into here. You know, D.I.Y suplexed Chris Sabin onto a chair at one point. Johnny Gargano went to do a double team suplex with Tommaso Ciampa to someone onto two chairs, and he turned them around so the backs are in the middle. and he ended up getting bounced off the backs of those chairs. There's you know what? I can't even tell you where to begin with this one. You've got people being dumped over the announce table. It really was just an incredibly complicated match, incredibly brutal match that sees everyone that took part in it get all their spots in that they needed to. Everyone got their shit in. Some of it was more brutal than others. Tommaso Ciampa managed to put Montez Ford through a bridge ladder with a white noise. That was probably one of the most impressive things. They had this ladder bridged on the outside of another. Yeah, Montez Ford just gets dumped through it by Tommaso Ciampa, and they both go down with that one. Johnny Gargano goes up top, and Motor City Machine Guns pull him down. And they end up getting a combo kick on Johnny Gargano, and then Motor City Machine Guns hit a skull and bones on Johnny Gargano through a table. One of them is stood on the apron with Johnny Gargano, and they hit the skull and bones through a table, which was absolutely mental. Chris Sabin put Angela Dawkins through a table. Montez Ford gets back into the ring and suicide dives over the top, putting Tommaso Ciampa through a table. People are just... broken bodies are lying everywhere. Tables are just getting destroyed. Angela Dawkins spears Tommaso Ciampa mid-air through a table. Tommaso Ciampa is hanging on to where the title belts have been attached. He's trying to get them off, and they've moved the ladders away, so he's hanging in midair. And just like Jeff Hardy got hit by Edge in that ruthless match between the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudley Boys, they had a repeat of that, and Angela Dawkins speared him out of the air, straight through the table. And this finally finishes with Street Profits managing to retain their title after Chris Sabin goes up the ladder, and there is, I want to say it's Johnny Gargano up the other side. Montez Ford is stuck in the ladder, but as they get halfway up, he's managed to relieve where he was stuck, and he springboards off the ropes halfway up the ladder, knocking Johnny Gargano and Chris Sabin down, and basically just climbs up around. If you look at these ladders, right, you've got one on each set of rungs, and Montez Ford's he's climbed up the side of it. There's nothing. He's stood on the bit that makes it stand still, and he's drops them both, swings up round onto the outside, and takes both titles off for Street Profits to retain those SmackDown tag team titles. I've not done this main event a huge amount of justice. I implore you to go and watch it on Netflix, on whichever service it is distributed on in the area that you live. But bugger me, this was a hell of a match, and to watch Street Profits come out with the title was pretty cool. Must admit, I was hoping Motor City Machine Guns were going to do it myself. We get Street Profits retain this one, and with the end of this episode and the end of this match, we get to see the final credits with Street Profits celebrating in the ring. So, brilliant episode this week. I have been Rich, and I will be back with Adam for Finishes and Factions does Monday Night Raw. Peace out.